What's up, Canada? Welcome to Soccer North. I'm your host, Andi Petrillo, and happy July as well. You know what that means? It means we are getting closer to the start of the Women's World Cup. They're already in Australia. They're training. You have the men and the CONCACAF Gold Cup. Everything is happening all at once, and we're talking everything on today's show. Here's what's coming up. Former Canadian international Amy Walsh, she joins me, and we have a little bit of fun with our starting 11 for the women. We also hear from Captain Christine Sinclair. I caught up with her before she jumped on a plane to head to Australia. And One Soccer's Alexander Gange joins the show to give his assessment of the Canadian men at the CONCACAF Gold Cup. But first, let's get you caught up on all the Canadian footy news and highlights on Keeping Up with the Canadians. Ashley Lawrence, the versatile Canadian player, has just signed with Chelsea FC, officially becoming a Blue. It's a monumental move after her sensational 6-year journey with Paris Saint-Germain. Over those 6 years, Lawrence made over 150 appearances, and she helped her team to a league title and 2 Coupe de France victories. Not to mention their memorable run to the Champions League final in the 2016-17 campaign. Now she'll be joining forces with fellow Canadians Kadisha Buchanan and Jessie Fleming, bolstering Chelsea's already formidable roster. And speaking of Canadian talents making waves in the football world, Benfica couldn't even go 24 hours without a Canadian. After Chloe Lacasse left, well, they just had to go and sign midfielder Marie-Yasmin Aladou. She bids farewell to Famalicão after an outstanding season, contributing 4 assists and 12 goals in 32 games. She even helped the club secure their first ever trophy. Now let's switch our attention to the pitch, where Evelyn Vienne simply can't stop scoring. Vienne is on an incredible run of form, netting her 12th goal in just 13 competitions. And get this, she's bagged 3 goals in her last 4 league appearances. Now, despite scoring in the last game for Kristianstad, her team fell 6-1. But nevertheless, Vienne is proving that the Canadian women's side won't be lacking firepower up front as we head towards the World Cup. Shifting gears to the NWSL, it was Bianca St. George in action with the Chicago Red Stars as they took on the San Diego Wave. St. George had an early chance to open up the scoring, but she struck the post, couldn't capitalize on the opportunity. She would later redeem that miss with the great hockey assist, starting the play that her teammate Ella Stevens would eventually head home. That would be the only goal of the game as the Chicago Red Stars beat the San Diego Wave 1-0. Now, St. George was left off the Canadian World Cup pre-camp roster, a victim of Canada's depth at fullback. Bianca St. George is putting together, though, another productive season with Chicago, starting in 12 of their 14 matches this season. So excited to have on Soccer North Amy Walsh, former international, represented Canada at the Olympics and World Cup, continues to bestow her pearls of wisdom of the game in the media, Footy Prime. Check out that podcast. Amy, welcome to Soccer North.
Thanks, Andi. Great to be here.
All right, let's talk about the Canadian women getting set for this World Cup. So when you take a look at that gold medal winning performance and the players who are on that team, who do you feel since then has grown the most, has surprised you the most?
I think if you want to underline really important players who are going to make an impact for this team, and their performance is really key to this team having a successful World Cup, is you have to talk about Jessie Fleming. And you talk about her season with Chelsea, all of the accomplishments that she sort of lived at this top class environment and team in the Women's Super League. What she's able to bring to the table immediately with her club form will just be so important to this team. And then you also a fellow midfielder in Julia Grosso. I don't think she's talked about enough. You know, she with Juve and what she's done there, her run of form, but also winning the best midfielder in that league over in Italy. I think the midfield is something that doesn't get discussed enough. The question is oftentimes where the goal is going to come from, and I'm sure that we will get to that. But the way that this midfield is going to tick along, the way that they're able to play on both sides of the ball is going to be absolutely integral to how this team performs in Australia and New Zealand.
Let's take a look at your starting 11. Now, this is based on absolutely everyone being healthy, little bit of a la-la land. And when you speak about your midfield, right, Quinn, Grosso, and you have Jessie Fleming a little further up the pitch, why do you like her in more of that creative 10 role?
Well, I alluded to it a little bit before about how important that link-up play is going to be for Canada. And when you talk about Jessie Fleming and you talk about technical ability and the ball at her foot, there's nobody better to drive the play, to get that progressive play that Canada is really going to need going forward. And whether, we'll talk about the absence or the presence of Christine Sinclair and how she's best utilized and how Bev Priestman is going to have to juggle that. But Jessie Fleming being higher up the pitch, finding those pockets of space, creating space for others and finding those seams to slot in the likes of a Jordan Huitema is going to be really key for Canada.
Let's talk about Jordan Huitema, because I have been so impressed by this player's growth. But now she has changed things up professionally, knowing that she has to get that playing time, to the point where she seems to have impressed you quite a bit, because she's starting for you at that number 9. What have you seen in her game that you've really liked?
Well, first of all, I'll talk about the importance of an out-and-out number 9 in Bev Priestman's starting 11. I think you need to be able to stretch the pitch. I think you really need somebody to stretch the opposition and to create space underneath. And what I've liked about Jordan Huitema is her ability to, especially with Jess Fishlock, have a partnership and link up with the midfield so that she's able to create space for herself. And even in her run, she's so smart, and that's a part of her game, I think, that is really developed in leaps and bounds, is the sophistication of the runs in the box. So even when she's not the one who's getting on the board, she's creating and pulling defenders out of spaces that her teammates are able to find.
Let's talk about these two tournaments here, because everyone keeps saying the World Cup is so much more different than the Olympics, and you've competed in both. What is the major difference?
The big difference is, the Olympics are more, it's a diluted field, more condensed field. It's more like a sprint compared to the World Cup deeper field. This is the first year where the women's tournament will move from 24 teams to 32 teams, but it's also the gap between the games. So it's 4 and 5 days between games versus a turnaround that's really quick of 2 days. And the difference in the mental game and the mental fortitude, or maybe just the management of that. And I think it was Christine Sinclair not too long ago said that in winning that gold medal, to go through those games, that would have only put them at the quarterfinals of the World Cup. So that really puts it into perspective. It's a longer tournament, more games. It has to be a slow build, a cagey, more conservative start, but you want to get that momentum going quickly. A completely different tournament, more of a marathon versus a sprint if you're comparing World Cup to Olympics.
All right, well, buckle up, because we're in it for the whole marathon. Can't wait. Amy, appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Andi.
You know that we did a bronze and we had to climb even harder to go and get a gold medal. Yet we didn't stand still, we kept climbing. We seem to thrive and grow on when no one expects us. Everyone thinks we just landed there and we were lucky. If we stand on the top and just hold on to that mountain, I think that does the absolute opposite of what got us there.
Joining the show, the captain, Christine Sinclair. Christine, great to chat with you. And, heading into the Olympics, we had a chance to speak with you and some of your other teammates as well. And you had this mantra, change the color. Do you have a mantra heading into this World Cup?
Not yet. No, I mean, it's our like kind of theme is like climbing a mountain. But in terms of, we don't have that motto yet that, we've had heading into, for instance, Tokyo, but I'm sure we'll come up with something. I'm sure it's on the to-do list when we get to Australia.
We know the Olympics and World Cup are two totally different tournaments, but you are the Olympic champions. Do you think you're entering this tournament with a target on your back?
I want to say yes, and I want to say no. So I have no answer. Yes. I think some of the lower ranked teams that we play against, like, see us as the Olympic champions and are like, if they get a draw against us or happen to beat us, it's, they're like, yeah, but then at the same time I say no, because I think we're still like disrespected and kind of brushed aside, and what we did in Tokyo was a fluke. So yeah, there's still, I think, a little bit of a lack of respect from some of the top countries in the world, and we're okay with that.
They're calling your group the group of death, but do you feel like Canada is giving this group that reputation because you are perennial contenders?
Well, no, I mean, it's exciting. You think of, like Nigeria, you never know what you're going to get with them. And then Ireland, I mean, they're good. I mean, they recently played the US and the games were very, very close. They defend well. And then Australia, I mean, I'm sure Australia, when our name was pulled in their group, was not the country that they wanted. With us being in pot 2 there, you know what I mean? So it makes for an interesting group, and heck, it's exciting. That's why we go. You go to a World Cup, you go to Olympics to play the best, and test yourself against the best. And we're just going to do it right off the bat.
Christine, if my math serves me correctly, your first World Cup was 2003. Do you still get nervous?
Oh, heck yeah. Absolutely. In terms of like friendly games or like club games, I've definitely like reined those in. But man, when it's like a World Cup, Olympics qualification, it means you care. It means it matters. And you put that pressure on yourself. It's exciting. It's why we play. You know what I mean? Like World Cups don't come along very often, and yeah, you get a little nervous for them.
How have you also seen your role evolve from 2003 to what your role is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, when I started with the team, literally it was just like boot the ball as far as we can, you know what I mean? And like, hopefully Sink will put it in the back of the net. No, I mean, we just played a direct style and I was fast, and it's just how we went. And now definitely a leader on the team, definitely pride myself on the impact I can have on the younger players, and whether it's their first or second World Cup, helping, just letting them know that it's okay to be nervous. I still get nervous, but ultimately it is just another game that they've played hundreds and hundreds of before.
We know this is a special group, a tight-knit group, and the way the year started, it was very tough. The She Believes Cup and all the distractions that were happening off the pitch. What did you learn, though, about the resiliency of this team?
I told the team this during the She Believes, was like, there's no other group I'd rather be going to battle with, on and off the pitch. I think what I learned, I think what our team learned, though, with the She Believes, was that there is a limit to your energy. And through those games, you could just see that we were like a deflated team, that didn't have the energy that we usually have. We didn't have the fight that we usually have. So I'd say that what I've learned is that, yes, we're going to go to battle. But once it gets World Cup time, the off-field battle has to end.
Ticket sales for this World Cup are through the roof. How have you seen the women's game grow, and how much more do you think there is to go?
I mean, the growth has been insane. I mean, just thinking about when I first joined the national team, when I first played professionally, just like the standards, the exposure. I mean, like I said, we finished 4th in a World Cup, and I don't think, I mean, besides your diehard soccer fans in Canada, I don't think anyone really cared. And now you just, especially in Canada, you see the growth of the game with the women's team success, the men's team success. We're heading down to tournaments now with expectations on our backs, and it's exciting. It's, what I've wanted my entire career. But that being said, there still is a long way to go. And obviously for Canada, we're still fighting to sign a CBA. And it's one that will be equal to the men's. So that's exciting, but obviously in the professional game, there's still a long way to go. I mean, I just sometimes try to wonder if I was a male player, what my life would be like, and I'm sure it'd be a little different than it is.
Christine, there's a lot of love for this team, and the fan base, they have their expectations, given that you are going in as the Olympic champs. But what are your expectations at this World Cup?
I mean, we're going there to win it. Look, I have to be realistic. Like, we're going there to win it, but so are probably, I'd say, 6 or 8 other teams. And it's the exciting thing about the women's game. It's growing, it's developing. There's up and coming countries that will surprise some teams at this year's World Cup. But yeah, we're going there to win it. And I think what Tokyo showed us was that we're capable of it. You need a little luck. You need sometimes the ball to bounce your way, but we're right there. And shoot, if you're not going to win it, why are you even going, you know?
A reminder, you can catch our weekly episodes Fridays on our CBC Sports YouTube channel and CBC Gem. We'll also be on the main network on the weekends right up until the Women's World Cup. Coming up shortly, we're going to turn our attention to the Canadian men in the CONCACAF Gold Cup with Gange of One Soccer. But first, Portland Timbers center back Zach McGraw was a surprise addition to the Canadian men's national team Gold Cup roster. A dual citizen, McGraw was actually recruited to the national team at a dinner with Canadian keeper Dane Sinclair. The towering defender is the first ever graduate of West Point to be drafted to MLS and is now proudly representing the Maple Leaf on the international stage.
My mom is literally 100% Canadian, and you don't really get much more Canadian than her. Big Wayne Gretzky and Edmonton Oilers fan. A lot of people don't know I watch hockey too, but yeah, there's more connection than people would think just looking at me. She's a little dramatic, so crying and screaming, and instantly wanted to go to Facebook. I said, "You can't post anything on Facebook yet." I'm like, please don't. But no, she's really excited. She's, excited that I, showcase the Canadian side of me.
Pleased to have on Soccer North, Gange, writer with One Soccer. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Awesome. It's a privilege, Andi. Thanks for having me on.
Well, let's talk about this Gold Cup. It's worth noting that we are doing this interview before Canada takes on Cuba, which we know, Alex, to be a must-win game. In the world of sport, we love to be hyperbolic, but this is truly a must-win. A draw simply won't do for the Canadians. Their first match 2-2 against Guadeloupe, 0-0 against Guatemala, which is why they find themselves in this situation. What do you make of Canada being in a must-win game?
I don't think anyone would have seen this coming months ago, certainly with the very favorable draw that they have. Felt like they were going to sleepwalk through this group, especially you have one game at home where they've been very, very good. They've only dropped points once before this Guadeloupe game, dating back till 2016, if I'm not mistaken, at home. So that was the big surprise. Then you play a Guatemala team where it's just a very uninspiring 0-0 draw. So it's just been a big surprise to see how flat the teams kind of looked across both games. Usually, throughout qualifying under John Urban, they've always been a team that's been up for these sorts of games. They've looked sharp, and we just haven't seen that sort of cutting edge from them this tournament in both boxes. And really, it feels like the draw, especially in the Guatemala game, flattered them. Maybe at home against Guadeloupe, yeah, they were leading. They probably could have held on, but also, again, 2-2 didn't feel unrealistic. And that's a surprise, because usually, at least if Canada was dropping points before, it really felt like, okay, that was the other team showed up. They did their job. Canada did what they could. In this game, in these two games, it feels like we haven't seen that from Canada. And that's probably the most frustrating part.
We'll get to the new faces in just a moment. McGraw, we just saw him, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it's still pretty veteran heavy. Are you surprised that Herdman doesn't seem to be getting the most out of these veterans, at least?
Yeah, it is a bit surprising, just because it felt like this tournament was going to be a chance to finally look at some of these newer faces. Of course, you want to win. You don't want to go into this tournament and go 3-0. But it's been surprising because Herdman's gone so veteran heavy, and it's really been the veterans that have struggled, especially defensively. Canada's looked shaky, and for the most part, it's been as much of the back line at the World Cup that he has available to him. So Kamal Miller, Steven Vittoria, and then you've kind of seen a rotation of faces kind of filling in that Alistair Johnston role. So that's been a big surprise. Of course, Milan Borjan in goal for the first 2 games. We'll see a new face on the Cuba game, of course, with him departing camp. So that'll be, we'll see if that shakes anything up at the back. And then in midfield, yeah, it's been, Jonathan Osorio-has been getting some heavy minutes in there. So that's obviously been a bit of continuity there. Richie Larea getting heavy minutes. Lucas Cavallini, and not surprising to say the least, but it's also something where you thought a few more new faces would slot in, give those guys a bit of rest, see how different positions look. And so far, that's the frustrating about these 2 results. You can't say and look, okay, the young kids went out and struggled and they learned. You're sitting there, okay, these are some of Canada's important players that are struggling out there. And that's kind of how do you look at that, and what does that mean for the program? If you're looking at takeaways from this Gold Cup.
And you have to wonder, again, starting the tournament off with a draw, if that really affected the way Herdman wanted to rotate the squad. And then it doesn't help with another draw against Guatemala. We're probably expecting a veteran-heavy lineup once again against Cuba. But 2 new faces we have seen quite a bit of, Ali Ahmed, Moise Bombito. Bombito has been switching positions. The first 2 games the first game in midfield, second game back line. Where do you see him best suited?
So far from what we've seen, it's that right center back position. You can tell he has a profile that Canada hasn't had on that back line, just that mix of size, but he brings speed. He brings that a bit of 1v1 ability. And I thought against Guatemala, that first 45, he was excellent. He kept winning those duels. He kept making it tougher for the Guatemalans down that right hand side. In the middle, I can see what John Herdman sees in terms of that potential. Immediately in the first game, what stands out is his play on the ball. You can tell that someone who just naturally is good on the ball. It's something you can't teach. What you could also see was that, okay, he hasn't really figured out the position yet defensively. He admitted as much after the game. I kind of asked him about how he felt, and he said, yeah, look, I love the idea, but it's something where if I'm going to play midfield, I have a lot to learn. So for Canada, I think it would make a lot of sense to play him on that right side of the back 3, because they need options there. And hey, maybe long term, if you can develop into that midfield role, it's something you look at, because Canada doesn't have a lot of number 6s coming up, or there are some center backs coming up through the system. But I think for now, for this term, I'd love to see more of him at the right center back.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome. Thanks, Andi.
In case you needed the reminder, we're less than 2 weeks away from Canada's first match at the World Cup as they kick off their tournament against the Super Falcons of Nigeria on Thursday, July 20th. 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. We'll, of course, have full reaction to the match the following morning right here on Soccer North. Oh yes, countdown is on to July 20th, but another date to keep an eye on is July 9th. That's when Bev Priestman will be revealing her final World Cup roster. And speaking of Bev, she'll be on Soccer North next week. As for the men, they advance out of the group stage in the Gold Cup and continue to chase the program's first trophy in 23 years. Thanks for tuning in to Soccer North, everyone. Have a great week.